What's the biggest contributor to most people's sleep issues? In my opinion, and other professionals' opinions, it's stress management. My opinion is based on all the work I do with clients and the assessment phase, where we discuss your lifestyle as it fits into the four domains: nutrition, your body, your bedroom setup, and mind space. And no matter what the hiccups are in those domains, they tend to point towards unhealthy stress management. So for this interview, I reached out to Lauren Wolfe, a Connecticut-based family therapist who specializes in one particular way to manage your stress throughout the day. It's called Emotional Freedom Technique. We talk about how it works, why it works, and how she came to learn its effectiveness. Unfortunately, it was during one of the most tragic events of American history where she was nearby as it unfolded. You're going to want to tap into this episode of The Why Behind Your Z's. Welcome to the Why Behind Your Z's podcast, the show that helps you maximize your sleep one night at a time. Brought to you by sleepyoudeserve.com. Welcome to another episode of The Why Behind Your Z's. I am your host, Paul Bright, certified sleep science coach and Air Force veteran. In today's episode, I interview Lauren Wolfe, a family therapist who also hosts her own podcast, Your Zen Friend. I originally tapped Lauren to talk about her expertise in emotional freedom technique, since many of my clients and audience members have stress-related sleep issues.
So I work as a licensed professional counselor, mainly with children and adolescents. I live in Fairfield County, Connecticut. I've been a therapist for more than 20 years. The math gets too hard at this point. So somewhere between 20 and 25 years. I absolutely love working with families, love what I do. And yeah, I'm so happy to be here with you today, Paul.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you coming on here to talk and about things that are related to sleep that are beyond my scope. And I always love having experts in other fields that are related to contribute because, as we've had conversations before, it's a pretty holistic affair when it comes to sleep, when it includes mental health and anxiety reduction. What got you to working with specializing with families?
I originally wanted to specialize in working with eating disorders, which is predominantly older adolescent girls. And I found that I just always had a real connection with children. And when I was working at this particular private practice where I was for about 13 years, I always was working with younger children and children who had anxiety. And I loved the work I did with them. And I found that I was able to really help them decrease anxiety. And at one point, I realized, why am I really searching to work with eating disorders? I think, except for the fact that that was something I had dealt with when I was younger. So I really started out wanting to kind of pay it forward, being so grateful of the people that helped me. But I at some point just realized, yeah, these are the people that I'm working with, the younger kids with anxiety. I'm good at this. I love this. And when I really just kind of embraced that, whoop, I got really, really busy. And I do still work with some individuals with eating disorders, but it's not predominantly what I do. And yeah, I love what I do. I love working with kids. So fun.
That's awesome. That's really good. You found your path through a
Yeah.
struggle.
Yeah.
And then it just kept going and building and morphing. And I love that. I love that.
Thank you.
Probably led
Thank you.
to a lot of things that you do now. I love it. And I got to sleep coaching almost the same way because it started with me having a problem. And I didn't even know you could be a
Oh,
sleep
yeah.
coach until maybe 5 years after I got rid of my issues. And I was like, hey, I
Wow.
wonder if you can have this as a profession besides the people that do all the sleep tests in the hospital. I was like, oh, this is a thing. This is cool. So, and I keep learning about different things that help people sleep, to include something that we're going to talk about today, because you mentioned this, when we did an
Hmm.
episode on your show. EFT tapping?
Yeah. EFT, which stands for Emotional Freedom Technique, which is also often referred to as tapping. And the short way to explain it is that you're essentially using talk therapy while also tapping on different meridian points on the body. So if you think about acupuncture, where a practitioner is inserting tiny little needles into different points of your body that's based upon Chinese medicine, you're tapping on different points. So, really, kind of like an acupressure while you're using the talk therapy. And it can be used to really reduce big feelings of emotion, to get clarity on a situation, to even help heal from trauma. That's a technique that you would go and work with a practitioner to really heal your trauma. Not something I advise people to try to do on their own, but there are modalities and ways that people can use it on their own as self care, which is so
Wow.
cool because I think as a mental health provider, I don't want people to have to depend on me forever, but I want to help them find tips and tricks that help them to, manage difficult feelings and just move through life on their own.
That's really
Yeah.
good. One of the things I talk about with sleep coaching and working with clients is that there's an area of mind space where you got to figure out and do different things for your mind. It's different for everybody, but sometimes you sleep better when you can prepare yourself by reducing anxiety, if anxiety is what you believe is keeping you up. Do you just tap
Hmm.
anywhere on your body? You said something about meridian points.
Yeah, yeah, great question. So probably you could because we've got a lot of different meridian points on our body. But there's a particular protocol for EFT where there are, depending on who you're talking to, which EFT practitioner, there's either 8 points or 9 points. So the way that I was trained, we now use 9 points. And you don't have to do them in any particular order. It doesn't matter. But I think the easiest way to do it is just starting at the top of your head. There's a point right in the middle of the head, then right where the eyebrow starts, side of the eye, under the nose, under the chin, or on the chin, really, under the collarbone, under the armpit. That's where kids say, "You're making this up." No, I know it's a weird spot, but I'm not making this up.
Right.
And the gamut point, which is on the top of the hand between ring and pinky finger knuckles. And you know what I'll do too, Paul? I'm going to make a graphic and have just a short explanation.
Awesome.
So if you want to include my email in your show notes, people can email me if they'd like that, and I'm happy to send
Oh,
that
that'd
to
be
them.
great because yeah, I would
Because I'm
definitely.
like pointing to the points, but
Yeah,
only you can see me.
only I can see
Yes,
you for now. Yeah,
yes,
for sure.
right,
But I
right.
like, yeah, okay. So there are specific points. You don't just tap it.
Yes,
And like, how hard do you tap?
no. Yeah, so if you're a teenage boy, you tap really, really hard. But
Like you're
otherwise,
drumming.
exactly. So hard I can hear you tapping on your sternum. But really, you just want to apply like a little bit of pressure so that it's hard enough that you can feel it, but it's comfortable.
Okay.
So, you're not trying to bruise yourself. You just have to feel it. And what's really cool is we actually have meridian points on the fingertips.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not just getting the benefit of tapping on that. Say, like if I'm tapping in the top of, in the middle of my head,
Right.
I'm not just getting the benefits of tapping right there. I'm also getting the benefits of that tapping, my head kind of touching my fingertips as well.
Right.
You really start with the side of the hand. So, the side of the hand, if you kind of bend your fingers over and then you look along the pinky side of the hand, and
Okay.
then you just take the opposite hand, doesn't matter which hand you use, and you just tap right under that, like, or right alongside the pinky finger side, alongside the side of the hand.
Our discussion turned to Lauren's origins of learning tapping, and that's when she revealed her close connection to the Sandy Hook tragedy and vicarious trauma. Warning: this section of our interview discusses gun violence and children. Listener discretion is advised.
since I first was exposed to it 10 years ago, it now has a lot of research on it showing the effectiveness of it. But I live in Newtown, Connecticut, and having gone through the Sandy Hook tragedy where so many
Whoa.
teachers and children were killed,
Wow.
that's when I was really first introduced to it in a kind of a deeper way. Or I guess I should say I had a real experience because I was invited to a like workshop for self-care for practitioners who were working with children and families affected by the Sandy Hook tragedy. And I went and I had such a profound experience from tapping in a group. So I wasn't even tapping on my own specific challenges, but I went home that night, Paul, and my son is the same age as the children who were murdered.
Ooh.
And so every night when I would put him to bed, I would have a thought, what if it had been him? And now we were this far out, right? So at this point, this was just before the year anniversary. And so that night I came home after having this tapping experience. I put him to bed and I had the thought, what if this had been my son? And it was like a voice said to me, like, that's not your situation. That's
Right.
not for you. And I had no emotional response. I didn't have all the fear that I typically had when I would think that thought.
Right.
And I thought, well, that's weird. And then as I continued each night, I no longer had all of that fear that was in my body. So at that point, I was so lucky to join this group. This was like a weird situation, but Nick Ortner has written the best-selling book, The Tapping Solution. He happened to live in my town of Newtown, Connecticut.
Hmm.
He was working with a practitioner named Lori Layden and helping Lori and some other clinicians who went to Rwanda to tap with orphans of the terrible genocide there,
Right.
because they found that in order to help people heal trauma, they didn't have the time and resources to do individual sessions with them. So they started doing healing in these group tapping sessions and found it to be really effective. So from there, they trained 12, oh, I forget, they had a name for them, but they trained 12 community members to then tap with their community. And so on the day of the Sandy Hook tragedy, Nick called Lori and said, like, it's happening here. My whole community is traumatized. What should I do? And she said, I think we do the same thing. So
Right.
she came to Newtown and helped train other individuals. And so I got involved in training, and they were so generous that for a year and a half, it was me and 9 other clinicians that were chosen. We did training twice a month for, my God, like 8 hours at a time. We had to do our own healing and tapping with them. And then they were giving us, helping community members get to us to do EFT. And so, really, what was born from my own experience that then made me say, like, I have to learn how to do this and get it to other people.
That is so valuable. That's so good. And what you spoke about, I think, is something that we in the mental health and social services field have an understanding of, but not necessarily everyone else who may be leaders in their families that are dealing with
Yeah.
tragedies or not necessarily directly, and that's vicarious trauma.
Oh, good
And
point.
vicarious trauma is exactly that, where you weren't part of the tragedy, but you were related to it or close enough to it that you
Mm-hmm.
start feeling the anxiety and some of the symptoms that people that were related to the trauma go
Yeah,
through. So they get the depression,
absolutely.
the anxiety, the inability to sleep, and even though they weren't in the middle of it, they were close enough to it.
Yeah.
And it sounds like when you were able to do the tapping, as you were looking at your own son, who, like you said, was the same age as those who died
Mm-hmm.
in the Sandy Hook
Mm-hmm.
tragedy, you started feeling that release of all the tension and emotions of what sounds like vicarious trauma.
100%. And what I now realize, having lived through this, is when we hear these horrible stories, and I'm just thinking of gun violence in particular, it's so horrible for the people directly impacted, but the way it affects everyone in that community is just something I would have never thought of, because for all of us, so Sandy Hook is part of Newtown, so we were all in the same town. It's a small town, and there's different elementary schools. we were all in lockdown for that entire day, not knowing what was happening, getting false information, not knowing who was safe, who was in danger. So, right there, most parents had some level of trauma,
Yes.
right? And then if you think about all the other people, the coroners and the ambulance drivers and the
Yes.
police
Yes.
officers, and like, and on, I mean, I could talk
Yeah.
about that for hours. I won't go down that road, but
Yeah.
just to say, I think more than ever, we need tools to help
Yeah.
ourselves to heal trauma at, the biggest level, and tools to just help ourselves work through difficult emotions that are healthy coping mechanisms, and not drinking alcohol or
Yes.
overuse of
Yes.
medication or shopping or
Yeah.
whatever.
It's interesting because when you work in these type of fields, it's weird. You're used to certain types of tragedies. You're used to certain types of
Mm,
complications, but something happening at that level with Sandy Hook,
hmm.
it can be harder to go through. And
Yeah.
I think within our specific type of population, people that are in the healing or in the services fields with this, we can take
Hmm.
for granted some of these tools. Like we know we can go to our own therapist and all that, but like you said, some
Hmm.
people don't have that resource necessarily. And then for us, we can say, well, we know how to do this type of work, so I
Hmm.
don't need to go to a therapist. I don't need to go see a
Right.
counselor. I got friends I can talk to, which is great in the moment, but then you come home and then
Right. Not the
can't
same.
and then not the same, and then
Yes.
you try to
Yes.
sleep. The tapping can definitely help.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can use it at any time of day or night. I'm thinking of this little cutie middle school boy that I used to work with, and he was so sweet. He came to me and he had a really big phobia of vomiting. And this is not typical. Results are not typical, but he and I had literally one 50-minute session of tapping, and he was no longer scared of vomiting.
Mm.
And I would say to him, like, let's say his name was Billy. I'd be like, Billy, I feel really mean, but like, imagine your sister vomiting. What if I vomited right now? I'm going to make gagging noises, like really looking like, are you having a
Yeah.
reaction? And he didn't. So I only saw him for a handful of sessions after that, but referred another middle school boy, a friend of his. And
It's the
so
best.
now I really felt so
Go
honored.
see
So
Miss
now,
Lauren. She's magic.
exactly. So now I'm seeing this kid. So the second kid's in there, and he says to me, we had a test today in school and I was feeling really anxious. So I just started tapping. And then I looked over and like Billy was tapping too. And I'm like, oh my God, boys, do not tap in the middle of your middle school class.
That's the
Like,
best.
yeah,
That's
you
awesome.
want to get a girlfriend or boyfriend. That's never going to happen if you're tapping away in the middle of your class. So I think best to do it when you're in private, or some people like to do it driving, with just one hand. Um, and here's where I think it can be great, which is at the basic level. If you just start at the top of your head and just tap, like, a good 5 or 6 times, take a nice deep breath in, take a nice slow breath out, especially if you want to make the exhale longer than the inhale, and then just go to the eyebrow point, do the same thing, and just go through all the points, 1 round, 2 rounds, whatever you need. I like to do that after work when I'm returning home. I will do that before bedtime often. It's just a way to feel more calm and grounded in your
Yeah.
body. And you don't have to remember the protocol to using it. There is a specific protocol, and I'm happy to talk about that if you'd like, Paul.
Yeah.
But that's just one real basic, simple way to use it. Or I tell my kids, you can just simply put your hands together, like put your thumbs together, pointer, middle, make that kind of little steeple with your hands,
Yeah.
and just kind of apply a little pressure, or just tap both hands together. And that's a nice way of also feeling calm and grounded. And you can, put your hands under your desk at school and just connect fingertips, or find that gamut point that runs between pinky and ring finger knuckles on the top of your hand, and just apply even a little pressure with your other hand. No one can see you do that,
Right.
but it's just a way of getting more calm and grounded.
Right. And doing it in private, I
Mm-hmm.
like that idea. It's not like you're trying to hide it, but
Right.
it becomes more personable and you become more in touch with yourself. I can see if you're making sure
Yeah.
this is for me to do, in the car before I get out, before I work. Uh,
Absolutely. Yeah.
I like that. I similarly, I know you do this too because you like
Mm-hmm.
to do the meditations, the guided
Yeah.
meditations, and I do
Mm-hmm.
too. And
Yeah.
using the body scan, and I do tend to start at the top of the head with the
Mm-hmm.
body with some of my stuff. I'm like,
Yeah.
raise your eyebrows as high as you can, try to touch and then relax, and I do
Mm-hmm.
that all the way to the neck. And I find sometimes with people, when I ask them, well, how did it go? It's like, well, I got as far as the neck and then I passed out. I'm like, cool.
Yeah.
But I'd like to know how the rest of it went. It's like, well, if I
Right.
can get there.
Yeah.
But with tapping, hitting some of these similar points, I don't think you're going to fall asleep, which is awesome.
No.
But you'll be more relaxed.
Yes. Good point. Yes. I've
Yeah.
never fallen asleep tapping. And yeah, if I'm someone that likes to go, go, go. So very often, if I sit down quietly, I will fall asleep, but I have not fallen asleep tapping. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. It sounds like a nice, good tension release
Absolutely.
from things too.
Yeah, if you're feeling really angry or really stressed or really anxious, it's just a good way to just decrease that emotion.
Okay. After the break, Lauren gives us a protocol on how to use tapping for those times when you go to bed and you're scared that you're not going to sleep.
Hi, I'm Lauren Wolfe, host of the Your Zen Friend podcast. On this podcast, I share wisdom from working as a licensed mental health therapist for more than 20 years. Using storytelling and lighthearted humor, each episode explores themes on personal growth, including tips and strategies to improve your mental health and overall well being. By subscribing to this podcast, you will get a new episode every Tuesday and also receive a drop of Zen, a short guided meditation each Friday. If you're a perfectly imperfect human like me, who's always striving to do better and feel better, then this podcast is for you. Find Your Zen Friend on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
So I'm thinking probably for my listeners that are looking for
Mm-hmm.
different ways to relax before bed, but this isn't necessarily going to put you to sleep. This
Mm-mm.
might be something good to try probably an hour before bedtime when you get to that
Mm-hmm.
point, if you're doing what you're supposed to do, which is not
Mm-hmm.
go from working to the bone to trying to pass
Mm-hmm.
out, and you give yourself like a good half hour space. This might be something good to put into practice, like that point where, okay, now I'm changing to my sleeping clothes, or let me do this right after I put up the laundry before I start relaxing to go to bed. So maybe this is really a really good time to do that for those who are going to use it to help themselves get ready for bed.
Absolutely. But even, I tend to work in the evening because I'm working mainly with kids and teens who are in school. And so sometimes I don't get home until like 9:30. And I typically go to bed around 10:30. So if that's the case, and now it's maybe 11, maybe a little bit later, but I'm still feeling kind of amped up from work, I'll hop into bed and I will just tap through the points
Okay,
a few times and
that's
do it
good.
right there just to kind of bring it down. Like
That's good.
I think anytime, yeah, in a perfect world, do all that,
Oh
have a
yeah.
nice long hour, 2 hours
Yeah,
to relax before bed.
yeah.
But in a pinch, 5 minutes, and
That'll
I
bring you down.
promise you'll feel a difference. Yeah. So I think if you, as a listener out there, take nothing away today besides just start at the top of your head and, breathe in nice and deeply and nice, long, slow exhale out, and then go to the next point, do the same thing, I think awesome. If you want to understand a little bit more, here's how you do it. You basically just check in and notice how you're feeling. So, say you're getting ready for bed and maybe you're someone who has trouble sleeping. And I'm sure you work with a lot of people that do this, Paul, where I'm afraid that I'm not going to sleep well.
Oh yeah.
Right?
The
Which is,
pervasive thought of like,
yes,
don't think about a pink pony is exactly
exactly.
what happens. Yeah.
Right. Because, yeah, if you've got that fear, yes, probably you're not going to sleep well, but also, right, round and round you go. It's hard to bring that fear down. All right. So you have that thought. I'm afraid I'm not going to sleep well. Then check in and ask yourself 0 to 10, how big does it feel? So let's say it's an 8. So now we're going to just simply say that statement. So you're going to go to that side of your hand, bending the fingers down, just tapping along the side of the hand under the pinky. And you're just going to say, even though. So it always starts with
Oh,
even though I'm afraid I'm not going to sleep well. And it's, what did I say? It's a 9. We'll say it's a
8.
9. Oh, I said 8. Thank you.
Mhm.
And it's an 8. And now you need a balancing statement. And what is most traditionally used in tapping is, I love and accept myself, or I love and accept myself anyway. And if that's just too, like, a bridge too far for some people, you can just say, like, and that's the way it is, right? You just need something kind of at least neutral.
Right.
And you say that 3 times. So 3 times tapping in the side of your hand, you'd say, even though I'm afraid I'm not going to sleep well, it's an 8. That's just the way it is, even though, right? You do that 3 times. Then you go to the top of your head and you just tap on that point in the middle of your head. I'm not going to sleep well. Eyebrow point. I'm afraid I'm not going to sleep well. Side of the eye. I'm afraid I'm not going to sleep well. And you just keep saying something like, I'm afraid I'm not going to sleep well, tapping through all of the points. I would do at least 2 rounds, and then you check in and you notice, how big does it feel now? Usually it'll feel smaller. Sometimes it gets a little bit bigger, and that's okay. And you just stick with it, and you just stay with it, continuing with that until you get it down as low as you'd like. When I'm tapping with individuals, I usually try to get it down to at least a 4 or a 3. Yeah,
It's so funky, yet it sounds almost counterintuitive
totally.
because
Tell me.
you're repeating the statement that of the thought that you're most afraid of, speaking it out loud and releasing the energy associated with that statement kind of brings
Hmm.
you to what you want.
So beautifully said. So often people are basically like, wait, say what? Like, that's going to stress me out more.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, if you think back to what, like early 2000s, when we were all into positive affirmations and
Mhm.
like, I move into relaxation and a great night of sleep. Well, guess what? Your subconscious is going to say BS, because that's what's really there. But if instead we're like, push it down, we don't want to look at it, it's still there. So
Right.
with tapping, you really acknowledge and sit with the fear or the difficult feelings in a way that, you've got that balancing statement that says, I love and accept myself. Or with kids, I do, you know, even though I'm afraid I won't sleep, I'm still an awesome kid, right?
Yeah.
You've got that balancing statement that's basically like, I accept myself even though I've got this thing, even
Right.
though I'm not sleeping and I'm scared I'm not going to sleep well. So
Right.
by really being able to sit with that difficult feeling, it helps it to decrease.
And it's in a
Yeah.
way, it's like the tapping, especially with
Yeah.
people that have difficulty sleeping, and they know that it's the worry and anxiety that is making it worse. By
Yeah.
accepting it and tapping and getting that emotional release from it, it could lead to actually end up leading to better sleep because now it's like, okay,
100%.
I've dealt with it. Here it is. Your body will respond. The body does try to do things, and whether you consciously think it's happening to you or not, it definitely happens. And I think some people do
Totally.
accept it because when they go on vacation, one of the first things they do is try to get a massage. I can't wait to sit in the sauna. I can't wait to get a
Yeah.
massage. Like that has nothing to
Right.
do with the traumatic brain or whatever's
Yeah.
caused trauma when you think about it at the surface level, yet your body has been responding to it.
Yeah.
And even when your sleep is very light, even if you're getting 6 hours of sleep, but it's very light, and you're not getting to deep sleep for whatever reason, your immune system has a hard time building up. Your reward system has a hard time of building up. All these things that keep you level and benefit you in the long term have a hard time building up. And unless you end up really getting a good, deep, relaxing sleep, the worse it gets as you get older. And so something like a tapping method, if you use it during the day to help release that tension buildup, actually can benefit your sleep at night. You start getting, I
Totally.
can totally see where this would help you get deeper sleep, deeper hours, because your serotonin, your endorphins, your natural dopamine production that's happening, it's not getting complicated because you've been releasing the emotional tensions related to whatever you're going through.
100%. It's like, I saw a meme recently that said something about like, when has anyone ever relaxed when somebody told them to relax, right? Like,
Right.
if I get really worked up about something and my husband, meaning well, is like, just relax. Like,
Calm down.
now I'm like
Calm down.
even more angry.
Yeah.
Now I'm coming for him,
How can I calm down at this point?
Exactly.
You
Like,
want me
what
to
are you
calm
talking
down?
about?
Exactly.
Yes. Because you just can't like talk yourself into relaxing typically if
Yeah.
you're really having a big emotional reaction. And with the tapping, because you're not just in that prefrontal cortex, you're having that experience, it is helping you to better do that. Instead, with EFT, you continue tapping, you stay with that emotion or that feeling or fear that the person's having, and they almost always get to a point where they have a reframe
Right.
that's so beautiful. And now it's so powerful for them because it came from them and from their experience. And I'm just, I'm thinking of a child who was in the Sandy Hook tragedy and like 10-15 minutes, and the intensity of what we were tapping on was so much smaller. And I asked him, how do you know it's smaller? And he said, because my pain used to wrap around the whole world, and now it just goes from this end of the room to the other.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, wow, like
Wow.
that is a profound experience, right?
Thank you so much for your time, Lauren. You provided such valuable insight into how we can tap into stress relief for better sleep. And when you have less stress, you have more success in getting the sleep you deserve. Once again, you can find Lauren Wolfe on her podcast, Your Zen Friend. The link to her podcast is in the show notes, and it is also available on almost every major podcast player. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to another episode of The Why Behind Your Z's. For more information and additional advice on how to help you get the sleep that you deserve, check the show notes for our email subscriber list. You can also visit our website, sleepyoudeserve.com.